The Dyson sphere of Stellaris wasn't exactly what you'd call a vacation hotspot, unless your idea of a getaway involved pollution levels that could choke a star and a population density that made sardines question their life choices. But hey, it was home, or as close to home as you could get when Earth was a nostalgic concept older than a politician's promise. Dr. Juno Kincaid, resident genius and sarcastic savior of the Ior, elbowed her way through the crowded marketplace, trying to ignore the mix of alien body odors that could only be described as unique. She kept her head down, partly to avoid eye contact, partly to avoid the occasional projectile of unidentifiable street food being flung between vendors. "This place is a germaphobe's worst nightmare," she muttered, sidestepping a suspicious-looking puddle with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Juno was on her way to the lab, where the air was clean and the company was slightly less obnoxious. Slightly. The place boasted a team of scientists so diverse, the UN would have had a field day. Her personal favorite was Gloob, a gelatinous blob of indeterminate species who communicated through squeaks and the occasional fart noise. "Morning, Gloob," she greeted as she entered, and Gloob replied with a noise that might have been a cheerful toot. The lab was a mess, but it was her mess, filled with half-finished experiments and enough paperwork to make an accountant weep. Juno tossed her bag onto a chair and got right to it, sifting through samples, each more alien than the last, and that's when she found it, the sample that made her stomach clench like she'd swallowed a bag of rocks. "Oh hell," she whispered, examining the data. "That's not good." Enter stage left, the mysterious illness. It was spreading faster than a tabloid rumor on a slow news day, and worse yet, it was affecting the alien population exclusively. Of course, the finger-pointing had begun. Why wouldn't it? Humans were always the usual suspects, the universe's whipping boys. Humanity, the scapegoat of the galaxy, she muttered bitterly. Juno needed answers, and fast, not that the powers that be cared about how overworked she was. She was a cog in the grand machine of Stellaris, expected to keep turning until she rusted out or exploded. The latter seemed more likely these days. "Hey, Doc," chimed in Max, her lab assistant, a kid with the enthusiasm of a Labrador and the attention span to match. "You look like someone just told you coffee was illegal." "Worse," Juno shot back. "We've got ourselves a plague and we're the prime suspects." Max blinked, then grinned. "Well, that's just fantastic. Any chance it's a misunderstanding? If by misunderstanding you mean they misunderstand how much they're going to hate us after I prove we're innocent, then sure." Max chuckled. "You always know how to brighten my day." Juno rolled her eyes and went back to the data. The illness was like a bad cold on steroids, and it didn't discriminate as long as you weren't human. She needed more information, and she needed it yesterday. "So what's the plan?" Max asked, leaning over her shoulder. "I'll need samples from all over. If we're going to clear humanity's name, we've got to figure out where this thing came from." Max nodded, looking like he was about to embark on an adventure rather than a potentially dangerous mission. "On it, boss." Juno watched him go, her thoughts spinning like a broken centrifuge. She needed allies, but good luck finding any when everyone was too busy blaming you for all their problems. "Here we go," she muttered, diving back into the data. Stellaris was a place where secrets were as common as air, and trust was a commodity rarer than gold. Juno had spent years here, navigating the social pitfalls like some twisted reality show. Over time, she'd learned that every smile hid a potential knife. It was a lesson that had saved her more times than she cared to count. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual chaotic energy. The marketplace was a symphony of shouts, laughter, and the ever-present hum of hovercrafts zipping overhead. Juno moved through it all like a ghost, her mind focused on the task ahead. "Hey, Kincaid," a voice called, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Saul, one of the unusually friendly vendors who sold questionable tech at even more questionable prices. "Heard the latest?" Juno stopped, raising an eyebrow. "If it involves someone getting eaten by their own pet, I'm not interested. Saul laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. Nah, something bigger. They say the council's finally getting off their asses to do something about the plague. About time, Juno replied, though she wasn't holding her breath for the council to solve anything. They were about as useful as an umbrella in a meteor shower. Yeah, well, don't hold your breath, Saul said, echoing her thoughts. Anyway, if you need anything, you know where to find me. I'll keep that in mind, Juno said, waving him off as she continued on her way. Back at the lab, she found Gloob fiddling with some equipment, making noises that hinted at frustration. Trouble in paradise? She asked. Gloob squeaked a reply that could only be interpreted as "you bet your ass." Juno sighed, running a hand through her hair. Join the club. At this rate, we'll all be gray blobs by the end of the week. She worked late into the night, combing through every piece of data she could get her hands on. But the more she looked, the more questions she had, and answers were in short supply. Then, like a lightning bolt to the brain, she had a thought. A terrible, wonderful, stupid thought. She needed to get into the council's vaults. They had records no one else could access. If there was a clue about the plague's origin, it would be there. Of course, breaking into a heavily guarded area was the kind of plan that could end with her in a cell or worse. But then, she'd always been good at doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. The next day she met with Max to hatch their plan. "You're sure about this?" he asked, a hint of nerves in his voice. "Nope," Juno replied, a grin tugging at her lips. "But when have I ever let that stop me?" "Fair point," Max conceded, looking far too excited for someone about to commit a crime. They waited until nightfall when the city was at its quietest. Quiet being a relative term, of course. Stellaris never truly slept, but it did doze off occasionally. Sneaking into the council sector was like trying to infiltrate a beehive without getting stung. But Juno was nothing if not resourceful. She had contacts in low places, and one of them owed her a favor. They made it past the first set of guards without incident. A little bribery went a long way, especially when it involved enough credits to buy a small moon. "I love our job," Max whispered as they crept through the dimly lit corridors. "Focus," Juno snapped back, her eyes scanning for any sign of trouble. "We get in, get the data, and get out." No heroics. The vault was everything she'd expected. Large, imposing, and locked tight enough to make her wonder if she should have brought a crowbar. Fortunately, Max was something of a tech wizard, and within minutes they were inside. Inside, rows of data banks stretched into the distance, each one a treasure trove of information. "Where do we even start?" Max asked, looking overwhelmed. "There," Juno said, pointing to a terminal. "If it's anywhere, it'll be in there." Max set to work, his fingers flying over the keys with the precision of a concert pianist. Data flowed across the screen faster than Juno could process. "Got it," he whispered, a triumphant note in his voice. "Good," Juno replied, grabbing the drive and slipping it into her pocket. Time to go. They retraced their steps, avoiding guards and cameras with the kind of luck that made Juno wonder if Lady Luck had finally decided to give them a break. But as they reached the exit, a voice shouted from behind them. "Stop!" Juno's heart skipped a beat, and she exchanged a glance with Max. "Run," she ordered, and they bolted into the night. They made it back to their sector, breathless and exhilarated. "I can't believe we did it," Max panted, collapsing into a chair. "Don't celebrate yet," Juno warned, pulling out the drive. "We've still got a lot of work to do." She plugged the drive into her terminal, watching as the data unfolded before her. It was a map of the plague's spread, detailed and terrifying. But there, buried in the data, was a clue, a tiny anomaly that pointed to a source. "I've got you," she whispered, a grin spreading across her face. But before she could celebrate, the lab door burst open and a group of armed guards stormed in. "Dr. Kincaid," their leader said, his voice cold as space. "You're under arrest." Juno's mind raced, but there was no way out. Not this time. "Well," she said, raising her hands. "Shit." The Dyson sphere of Stellaris was bustling like a hornet's nest poked by an overzealous toddler. The news of the plague had spread faster than a cheap takeout-induced stomach bug, and the Galactic Council was caught in the crossfire of confusion. suspicion, and the universal pastime of blaming humans for everything from climate change to bad reality TV. Enter Ambassador Torrin Voss, Earth's designated punching bag and representative, who'd been summoned to the Council's Grand Chamber. It was a place so pretentious it could have doubled as a set for a space opera. Voss adjusted his ill-fitting suit, standard issue for diplomats with no fashion sense, and took a deep breath. He was about to defend humanity's honor, or at least what was left of it after millennia of screwing things up. The chamber was a cacophony of voices, each alien delegate trying to outscream the other. Voss stepped onto the central platform, wishing for a stiff drink or a sudden meteor strike. "Gentle beings of the Council," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 earthly regrets. "I stand before you not just as Earth's ambassador, but as a testament to our continued ability to make things worse before they get better." The assembled aliens, a bizarre collection of scales, fur, and more tentacles than a sushi bar, glared at him with thinly veiled distrust. He was about as welcome as a fart in a spacesuit. Ambassador Voss, intoned the chair, an intimidating figure with eyes like black holes and a voice that could shatter glass. "Your species stands accused of unleashing this plague upon the galaxy. What say you in defense?" Voss cleared his throat, praying his next words wouldn't get him vaporized on the spot. "First, let me assure you, if humans were responsible, you'd know it. We're not subtle. Second, we're just as confused as everyone else. We're working tirelessly to uncover the truth behind this illness, and I can promise you it does not serve our interests to be the scapegoats." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Some delegates looked skeptical, others seemed convinced he was full of more crap than a sewage treatment plant. "You must understand," Voss continued, laying on the diplomacy thick like cheap cologne, "we are actively searching for a cure with the help of our top scientists." The chair's gaze bore into him, making Voss wish he hadn't skipped breakfast. "And these scientists, have they made any progress?" Voss hesitated. "Well, progress is a relative term. We're closer than we were yesterday, and isn't that something?" He flashed a smile that had been described as both disarming and likely to cause nightmares. The council was unimpressed. Voss was about to speak again when an aide tapped his shoulder, whispering something about incoming data from Dr. Juno Kincaid. Voss hid his relief beneath a practiced diplomat's facade. "If you'll excuse me, I have urgent news to attend to." "Rest assured we'll get to the bottom of this." He exited the chamber with all the grace of a man running from an angry mother-in-law. Once outside, he punched the comms button. "Kincaid, tell me you've got something good, or at least something that won't get us lynched." Juno's voice crackled through the static. "Oh hey Voss, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I think I found a lead on the plague. The bad news, I'm currently under arrest, so there's that." Voss's response was a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. "You're kidding, right? This is some kind of joke. Wish it were. The guards here aren't exactly the jovial type, so unless you can pull a rabbit out of your diplomatic hat, things are going to get ugly." Voss sighed. He pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to stave off the migraine that was forming. "All right, sit tight. I'll see what strings I can pull, but you owe me big time for this." He ended the call and headed straight for the diplomatic offices, which were conveniently located right next to a bar, probably because the designers understood the mental toll of dealing with galactic politics. He needed an ally, someone with enough clout to keep Juno's neck off the chopping block. Unfortunately, most of his contacts were either out for his blood or had the spine of a jellyfish. But there was one person who might help, if only to see what chaos unfolded. Voss made a beeline for the office of Ambassador Xylia from the Zoltran Confederation, one of the few species who didn't actively wish humanity ill, at least not overtly. Xylia was sipping some kind of gelatinous drink when Voss burst in, her antennae twitching in mild surprise. "Ambassador Voss, to what do I owe the pleasure of this unexpected intrusion?" Voss forced a smile, the kind that usually precedes a desperate plea. "Xylia, we've got a situation. Dr. Juno Kincaid's been arrested, and I need your help to get her out. She's close to a breakthrough on this plague business. Xylia regarded him with eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. And why should I assist you? What's in it for the Confederation? How about not having a plague ravage your planets? Voss shot back, his patience fraying like a cheap suit. Look, you know as well as I do that if this isn't solved, there'll be chaos. Trade routes disrupted, alliances strained, and nobody wants that kind of headache. Xylia considered his words, tapping her long fingers on the desk. Very well, she said finally. I will see what I can do. But remember, Voss, favors are like currency. They must be repaid. Of course, Voss nodded, relieved to have at least one ally in this mess. I won't forget it. With Xylia on board, Voss felt a glimmer of hope. He made his way back to his quarters, where he could finally process the situation without the constant threat of someone trying to fry him with a death ray. The message from Juno played on a loop in his mind. She was close to uncovering something important, and if they could clear humanity's name, he might just avoid returning to Earth as the ambassador who doomed them all. The next morning, Voss woke to find a message waiting for him. Xylia had worked her magic, and Juno had been released, albeit with the stern warning that her every move was being watched. Voss couldn't help but chuckle at that. Juno watched. That was like trying to herd cats, impossible and only likely to end in tears. He called Juno again, eager to hear what she'd discovered. Kincaid, you better have some good news after the hoops I jumped through. Juno's voice was a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. Oh, don't worry, I've got something. The data we pulled shows a pattern in the plague spread. It didn't start on Stellaris, it was introduced. Introduced? Voss's mind raced. So it's not naturally occurring. Exactly, Juno replied. And it gets better. The point of origin seems to be linked to a shipment from one of the outer colonies. I've got the details, but we'll need to act fast before this thing mutates further. Voss nodded, even though she couldn't see him. All right, let's get a team together. We'll need to present this to the Council and prove our innocence. Consider it done, Juno said, determination in her voice. I'll meet you at the lab. As Voss prepared to leave, he caught a glimpse of his reflection, a tired, slightly haggard figure doing his best not to drown in diplomatic sludge. He straightened his tie and headed out. Humanity's fate was riding on their shoulders, and they couldn't afford to drop the ball. The lab was a hive of activity when Voss arrived. Juno and her team were busy dissecting the data, each discovery bringing them closer to the truth. Gloob was there too, emitting a series of toots that Voss could only assume were words of encouragement. All right, Juno said, gathering everyone around. We've got solid evidence that the plague was deliberately introduced. This is our chance to clear humanity's name, but we'll need to convince the Council. And how do we do that? Max asked, ever the eager beaver. By being smarter and faster than whoever set us up, Juno replied. We've got the data, now we just need to present it in a way that even the most skeptical alien can't deny. Voss nodded, feeling the weight of their mission settle on his shoulders. All right, folks, let's get to work. We've got a galaxy to win over. With that, they dove into preparation, knowing that their next move would determine humanity's fate in the stars. If they played their cards right, they might just come out on top. If not, well, Voss preferred not to think about that. They had a chance, and that was more than they'd had yesterday. The Council awaited, and Voss hoped this time they'd be leaving the chamber with more than just accusations. Humanity was due for a win, and he intended to deliver. The lab buzzed with a frenetic energy that was only slightly less chaotic than a toddler hopped up on sugar. Dr. Juno Kincaid, looking like she'd been chewing on data sheets instead of breakfast, was at the center of it all. Her team worked around her, a symphony of frayed nerves and caffeine-fueled perseverance. All right, listen up, Juno called, clapping her hands together in a vain attempt to get her team's attention. We've got anomalies in the Dyson sphere's energy patterns, and we need to pin down if these are linked to the plague. Gloob, their resident gelatinous blob with communication skills that made a kazoo sound dignified, burbled a series of enthusiastic squeaks. Juno took that as a nod of agreement. Or maybe Gloob was just hungry. It was hard to tell with blobs. A scientist named Marlowe, whose hair looked like it was trying to escape her head, glanced up from her terminal. I'm picking up fluctuations in the energy grid, Juno. It's almost like someone's been siphoning off power for something big. And by big, I mean potentially catastrophic. Wonderful, Juno replied with a dry chuckle. Because what we really need right now is another potential catastrophe. What's one more? Marlowe shrugged, going back to her tangled mess of wires and circuits. It's not like we're juggling enough flaming chainsaws already. Juno moved to her own screen, staring at the data as if sheer willpower could make the numbers make sense. The question is, who's got the means and motive to mess with the Dyson sphere like this? Voss entered the lab, looking like a man fresh off a losing streak at the casino. Kincaid, tell me we've got something. Anything that can get these paranoid extraterrestrials off our backs. We might, Juno replied, tapping a few keys. But it's fuzzy. Someone's actively covering their tracks and doing a damn good job of it. These changes in energy patterns, it's deliberate. Someone's using the sphere's power to spread the plague. Voss's eyebrows shot up. Deliberate? This isn't just bad luck or human clumsiness. Nope, Juno said, popping the pea with grim satisfaction. This is sabotage. Someone's framing us and they're doing a stellar job. Pun intended. Great, Voss muttered. Just what we need. An intergalactic game of pin the blame on the humans, Juno smirked. Well, at least they're consistent. We're always the galaxy's favorite scapegoat. Before Voss could respond, the lab's intercom crackled to life. Doctor, Kincaid, please report to the Council's chamber immediately, came the stern voice of the chair, as welcoming as a Death Star's exhaust port. And bring your findings, Voss groaned, sounding for all the world like a man handed a bill after a bad meal. Looks like we're up for another round of Why Humans Suck. Juno rolled her eyes, grabbing her data slate. Let's go. Maybe we can convince them we're not the universe's designated troublemakers. They made their way to the Council's grand chamber, a place so stuffed with self-importance it practically had its own gravitational pull. The delegates were assembling, their expressions ranging from skeptical to downright hostile. The chair sat at the head of the room, their eyes like twin black holes, ready to consume any excuse handed to them. Dr. Kincaid, the chair began, voice dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for lawyers and telemarketers. You claim to have evidence regarding the plague's origins. Juno nodded, her face a mask of professionalism despite the sense of impending doom. Yes, Chair. We've detected anomalies in the Dyson sphere's energy output. It's being used to distribute the plague. This isn't a natural occurrence, it's sabotage. A murmur spread through the room, a ripple of doubt and intrigue. Juno continued, we have reason to believe someone is actively framing humans to cover their tracks. We're as much victims of this as you are. Ambassador Voss stepped forward, seizing the moment. Gentle beings, I implore you to consider the evidence. We stand on the brink of a galactic catastrophe, and the only way forward is through cooperation. Together, we can find the real culprit. The chair's eyes narrowed as if trying to decide whether to swallow Voss whole or spit him out. And what do you propose as a solution, Ambassador? Voss hesitated only for a moment. A joint task force. Diverse species, working together to track the energy anomalies. We pool our resources, our genius, to find the truth. The murmurs grew louder, a chorus of agreement and dissent. The chair leaned back, considering. Very well, they said finally. A task force will be formed, but know this, if humans are indeed responsible, the consequences will be dire. Voss nodded, hiding his relief behind a veneer of diplomacy. Understood, Chair. We will not rest until the truth is uncovered. As the meeting adjourned, Juno turned to Voss, a wry smile on her face. Well, that went better than expected. We're only slightly less doomed than we were an Ior ago. Voss chuckled, though it was more of a release of tension than genuine amusement. Yeah, I'll take slightly less doomed over completely screwed any day. Back at the lab, the team regrouped, ready to tackle this new phase of their investigation. The mood was charged with a mix of anxiety and determination. They had a glimmer of hope, a path forward, and it was more than enough to keep them going. Marlowe was already at her station, fingers flying over the keyboard. I've got us a lead on the energy siphoning. There's a pattern, a signature. Whoever's behind this is sloppy. Sloppy's good, Juno replied, pulling up the data on her own screen. Sloppy means mistakes, and mistakes mean we can catch them. Gloob emitted a series of delighted toots, which Juno interpreted as agreement. Or maybe Gloob had just discovered a new flavor of space pudding. Either way, it was nice to have a cheerleader. Voss leaned against a console, watching the team with a sense of pride. They were on the front line of this mess, and despite the odds, they were holding their own. All right, let's track this signature. If we can find out who's behind this, we might just save the galaxy's collective backside. The team worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle with the tenacity of a dog with a bone. Hours turned into days as they chased leads, followed trails, and sorted through a mountain of data that would have made a lesser team weep. Eventually, their efforts paid off. Marlowe slammed her hands on her desk in triumph. Got it. The energy signature matches a known rogue faction operating on the fringes of the Dyson sphere. They've got a history of anti-human rhetoric. Of course, Juno muttered, rubbing her temples. Nothing unites people like a common enemy, and who better than us pesky humans? Voss straightened, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. We need to take this to the council. If we can prove there's another player in this game, we can turn the tide. Juno nodded, adrenaline replacing her exhaustion. Let's go. I'm ready to shove this in their faces. As they left the lab, Gloob trailed behind, leaving a trail of enthusiastic bubbles in their wake. The journey to the council chamber seemed shorter this time, driven by the urgency of their discovery. The council reconvened, their curiosity piqued by the sudden request for an audience. The chair watched them approach, skepticism still etched into every line of their face. Dr. Kincaid, Ambassador Voss, the chair greeted, voice as welcoming as a tax audit. You have new information. Juno stepped forward, her voice steady and filled with purpose. Yes, we've traced the energy signature to a rogue faction within the Dyson sphere. They are the ones spreading the plague, framing humans to cover their tracks. The room erupted into chaos, a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. Voss held his ground, projecting calm amidst the storm. This faction has a history of anti-human sentiment. They're exploiting the crisis to turn the galaxy against us. The chair raised a hand, silencing the room with a gesture. These are serious allegations. You have evidence to support this claim. Juno nodded, handing over the data. Everything's here. The energy traces, the communication logs, the faction's past activities. It all points to them. The chair studied the data, their expression shifting from doubt to grudging acknowledgement. Very well, we will launch an investigation. But know this, humans, any deception will not be tolerated. Voss exhaled slowly, the weight of the world easing just a fraction. We understand, Chair. We're committed to seeing this through. As they left the chamber, Juno glanced at Voss, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Looks like we've bought ourselves some time. Time's good, Voss replied, matching her smile. It's a start, and sometimes that's all you need. As they returned to the lab, the reality of their situation settled in. They were far from out of the woods, but for the first time in a long time, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. They had allies, a plan, and a chance to clear humanity's name. In the grim darkness of space, a glimmer of hope was a precious thing indeed, and they intended to hold on to it with everything they had. The sound of explosions interrupted the relative peace of the Dyson sphere's human district. It was the kind of noise that got your attention faster than a tax collector with a penchant for personal visits. Marlowe was the first to realize it wasn't just another day at the interstellar fair. Holy shit, she muttered. nose pressed to the lab's window like a kid at a candy store, except this store was burning. "Is that?" "Yeah," Juno replied, joining her at the window. "Looks like someone just decided to throw a fireworks show and forgot to invite us." Voss burst into the lab, radiating panic like a malfunctioning reactor. "What the hell is going on?" "Surprise attack," Juno said, voice flat. "Someone's bombing the human district." "No kidding," Voss replied, his sarcasm cutting through the chaos. "I thought that was just the national anthem." Overhead, the lab's comm system blared to life, the voice of the Dyson Sphere's emergency broadcast system as calming as a dentist's drill. "Attention, all personnel. Unknown assailants have launched an attack on the human sector. Evacuate immediately." "Looks like someone skipped the diplomacy part of intergalactic relations," Marlowe quipped. Voss grimaced. "We need to get to the council. If they think we're retaliating." Yeah, Juno cut in. "The galaxy's favorite punching bag gets another whack. Let's move before someone decides to upgrade our status from scapegoat to sacrificial lamb." The trio rushed through the corridors, weaving between panicked scientists and the occasional confused blob of gloob who seemed to be vibrating with excitement or fear, possibly both. Alien emergency systems were notoriously unpredictable. Reaching the grand chamber was no small feat, but Juno and her motley crew made it just in time to see the council in a state of chaos. The air was thick with accusations, each one heavier than the last. The chair was trying and failing to maintain order. The moment Voss stepped into the spotlight, the room fell silent. "Please," he began, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We have no involvement in this attack. We're as much victims as anyone. You expect us to believe this?" One of the delegates sneered, their features half hidden behind a plume of cigar smoke that seemed to defy all known laws of physics. "While our sectors burn, I don't expect you to believe anything," Voss shot back. "But targeting us now is like picking a fight with a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. We're not in a position to bomb anyone." Juno admired Voss's ability to use humor as a shield. If only it could deflect laser beams, they'd all be safe. The chair raised a hand, stirring the room back to a rumbling quiet. "What proof do you offer that humans are not behind this attack?" "That's just it," Juno interjected, stepping beside Voss. "We think the attack and the plague are connected. Something's wrong with the Dyson sphere itself. We detected anomalies that suggest a malfunction." The crowd reacted like a startled flock of birds, suspicion and disbelief rising. "That's a stretch," someone muttered. "Convenient," another added. "Convenient my ass," Juno replied, her tone sharper than a butcher's cleaver. "We've got data showing the energy patterns are off the charts, enough to cause catastrophic failures. This attack might just be the beginning." As the council members digested the information, Voss leaned in, lowering his voice. "We need them to see reason before this whole place goes from Dyson sphere to Dyson ashes." They spent the next hour in a verbal tug-of-war with the council, each side trying to out-cynical the other. Finally, the chair sighed, the sound like 1,000 souls resigning to their fate. "Dr. Kincaid, Ambassador Voss, you have until the next cycle to prove your claims. If not, our response will be severe." A truce, Juno thought, but a truce with a ticking clock. As they left the chamber, she turned to Voss. "Clock's ticking. We need that evidence." "No pressure," Voss replied, the weight of the galaxy evident on his brow. "Just the collective survival of our species." Back in the lab, the team was as focused as a caffeine junkie with an unlimited Starbucks card. Marlowe hacked away at her terminal, fingers flying with the desperation of someone trying to type their way out of a bad breakup. Gloob, for its part, was making encouraging burbling sounds, or perhaps just having an existential crisis. "Got something," Marlowe announced, eyes glued to her screen. "There's a pattern in the energy fluctuations. It's not random. It's almost like a code, and it's affecting the sphere systems." "Code?" Voss asked, eyebrows arching. "You mean this might be intentional sabotage?" "Could be," Marlowe replied. "Or just a really, really bad case of cosmic indigestion." Juno scrutinized the data, her mind racing faster than a hyperdrive on overdrive. We need to isolate the source. Where's it coming from? Deep within the sphere, Marlowe said, pointing to a cluster of readings on her screen. If we can get there, we might find out what's causing all this. Voss sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. So let me get this straight. We have to venture into the belly of the beast, find the malfunction, or sabotage and fix it, all while avoiding getting blown to bits. Pretty much, Juno confirmed, her smile more grim than hopeful. But hey, at least we're not bored. Preparations were quick, mostly because they couldn't afford to be anything else. They gathered what equipment they could, hoping it would be enough. As they made their way to the depths of the sphere, the ambience shifted from sterile technology to a more decrepit, forgotten sector. It was as inviting as a haunted house with free entry on Halloween. Feels like we're walking into a horror flick, Marlowe muttered, eyes scanning the environment. Yeah, except here the monster's probably a disgruntled AI or an overzealous vacuum cleaner, Juno replied, keeping her voice light even as tension coiled in her gut. The team reached a vast chamber, the air humming with an energy that felt wrong, like a song played slightly out of tune. Juno could see the source of the disturbance, a massive, throbbing device entwined with the sphere's power conduits, pulsating with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. That's it, Marlowe said, her voice tinged with awe and dread. That's what's screwing everything up. Juno approached the device, her mind a maelstrom of thoughts. If we can shut this down, we might stop the attacks and the plague. Voss was surveying the area, ever the diplomat even in a potential death trap. And we prove humanity's innocence. Hell, if we play our cards right, we might even get an apology, or at least a my bad. With a quick glance, Juno signaled the team into action. They set to work, a blend of science, intuition, and good old-fashioned luck guiding their hands. The controls were alien, the technology advanced, but the fundamental principles were universal. As they hacked, rewired, and improvised, the tension was palpable, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, except the shoe was a bomb and it was already halfway down. Finally, with a decisive click, the device powered down, its malevolent hum fading into silence. The change was immediate, the sphere's energy stabilizing, the oppressive air lifting like a storm breaking. We did it, Marlowe breathed, disbelief coloring her voice. Don't jinx it, Voss replied, ever the pessimist. We've still got to make it back and prove this to the council. Juno nodded, stuffing her nerves back into their box. Let's move before our luck decides to cash out. The journey back was a blur of adrenaline and urgency, the stakes higher than ever. As they re-entered the council chamber, the delegates were already in session, their murmurings a backdrop to the uneasy calm. Ambassador Voss, Dr. Kincaid, the chair greeted, their voice a mix of skepticism and curiosity. You have returned, and we brought receipts, Juno replied, brandishing the data like a weapon. The anomalies were caused by a rogue device embedded in the sphere systems. It was manipulating energy patterns, spreading the plague, causing chaos. The room erupted into whispers, the delegates like a flock of birds, each vying for their piece of the truth. Voss stepped forward, radiating a calm that belied the chaos. The evidence is clear. This wasn't human sabotage. This was a system failure, possibly exploited but not instigated by humanity. The chair studied the data, their expression shifting from doubt to grudging acceptance. It seems we owe you an apology, Ambassador, they said, the words sounding as unnatural as a vegan barbecue. Voss accepted the non-apology with grace. We understand the pressures you're under. Let's work together to ensure nothing like this happens again. As they left the chamber, Juno felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They'd bought humanity some time, some much-needed breathing room, but the real work was just beginning. Well, she said to Voss, a hint of a smile on her lips. Looks like we're only mostly screwed now. I'll take mostly screwed over completely boned any day, Voss replied, his relief palpable. As they walked back to the lab, ready to face whatever else the universe decided to throw their way, Juno couldn't help but chuckle. In the grim darkness of space, they'd found a sliver of hope, and that was more than enough to keep them going. The Dyson sphere was having a day as bad as a politician caught with their pants down. Systems were failing, the city was on the brink of implosion, and the air was filled with the kind of tension you get when waiting for a bomb to go off. Dr. Juno Kincaid and her ragtag team of misfits were neck-deep in chaos, racing against time to keep the whole damn thing from collapsing like a poorly built house of cards in a hurricane. "Well, this is a hell of a pickle," Marlowe muttered, her eyes glued to the terminal that was vomiting error messages faster than a college freshman after a kegger. "The whole system's about to go tits up." "That's the spirit," Juno replied with a wry smile. If sarcasm was a weapon, she'd be armed to the teeth. Just what I needed to hear. Voss, ever the diplomat, was pacing like a caged tiger, his mind flitting through the political minefield they were about to navigate. "We've got bigger problems than sweet-talking the council," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Someone's trying to make sure we take the fall for this." "Who'd want to frame us now?" Marlowe asked, not taking her eyes off the screen. "The list is longer than Gloob's grocery receipts." Gloob, the gelatinous blob, gave a burbling sound that could have meant anything from agreement to indigestion. It was hard to tell with Gloob. "Focus, people," Juno snapped, drawing their attention back to the task at hand. "We've got to stabilize this mess before we're all floating in space with 'I told you so' engraved on our tombstones." The lab was a hive of activity, and not the friendly kind. Equipment buzzed angrily, screens flickered like they were possessed, and the overhead lights flickered ominously, just in case anyone doubted things were about to go sideways. Marlowe tapped furiously at the keys, her face a mask of concentration. "There's a cluster of energy spikes here," she pointed to the display, "and here. Someone's playing with the circuits like it's a game of cosmic Jenga." "Great," Voss muttered, leaning over her shoulder to get a better look. "Just what we need, an intergalactic prankster with a god complex." Juno considered the data, her mind churning through possibilities faster than Gloob could devour a plate of tacos. "These spikes aren't natural. This is sabotage, plain and simple." "No shit, Sherlock," Marlowe said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But why now? Why the sudden need to turn the sphere into a cosmic barbecue? Discredit humanity," Voss suggested, his eyes dark with understanding. "If the sphere fails and we get the blame, we're done for. The council will hang us out to dry faster than you can say scapegoat." Juno nodded, her expression grim. "Then we better fix it before they light the torches and grab their pitchforks." "We need access to the core systems," Marlowe said, typing furiously. "That's where the real damage is being done. Access we're not likely to get with the council breathing down our necks," Voss pointed out, his tone more resigned than hopeful. "But if we don't try," Juno countered, "we might as well book a one-way ticket to the afterlife." With a plan as thin as their chances, they set off through the bowels of the sphere, the corridors a tangled mess of pipes, wires, and shadows. The air was thick with the kind of tension that made your skin prickle and your nerves sing. "Feels like we're marching into our own funeral," Marlowe quipped as they trudged along. "Cheer up," Voss replied dryly. "At least we won't have to worry about what to wear." Their march led them deeper into the sphere's innards, where the heart of the disaster pulsed like a malignant tumor. The core chamber was a monstrous space, filled with machinery that hummed ominously, the air crackling with static. "Here's where the magic, or mayhem, happens," Juno announced as they entered, the enormity of the task settling over them like a winter chill. Marlowe set to work immediately, her fingers dancing across the console with a mix of desperation and determination. Voss stood by, ready to play diplomat or bodyguard as the situation demanded. "Found the override," Marlowe said, her voice strained. "But it's locked tighter than a miser's wallet. Gonna take a miracle to break through." "Miracle's my middle name," Juno replied, though her smile was more grimace than grin. She joined Marlowe, their combined efforts a flurry of motion and focus. As they worked, the sphere shuddered, a low rumble rolling through the structure like a threat. Time was running out faster than a gambler's luck on a bad night. Come on, Marlowe whispered, coaxing the system like it was a temperamental child. Any day now, Voss muttered, his eyes darting to the door as if expecting the council to burst in at any moment, pitchforks and all. With a final, triumphant beep, the console glowed green, the lock disengaging with a satisfactory click. "We're in," Marlowe announced, a victorious grin splitting her face. "Now all we have to do is save the world," Juno said, rolling up her metaphorical sleeves. "Piece of cake." They dove into the core systems, unraveling the sabotage with a mix of skill and sheer stubbornness. The air was thick with tension, each second ticking by like a countdown to disaster. "Almost there," Marlowe said, sweat beading on her brow as she worked. "Better hurry," Voss urged, his voice tight with urgency. "I'd rather not end up as cosmic dust." Juno's fingers flew over the controls, her mind racing with calculations and contingencies. "If we redirect the power flow here," she said, pointing to a schematic, "we can stabilize the system long enough to reboot." "Do it," Voss said, the weight of the galaxy in his voice. With a final keystroke, the system whirred to life, the lights flickering back to steady brightness as the sphere shuddered, then stilled. The oppressive tension lifted, replaced by a collective sigh of relief. "We did it?" Marlowe asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "We did it," Juno confirmed, though her relief was tempered with the knowledge of the road ahead. "But don't break out the champagne just yet. We've still got a council to convince." They made their way back through the labyrinthine corridors, the sphere's systems humming with renewed life. The stakes were still sky-high, but for the first time, Juno felt a sliver of hope. As they re-entered the council chamber, the delegates were already in session, their murmurings a backdrop to the uneasy calm. Juno and her team marched in, their presence commanding attention like a last-minute plot twist in a soap opera. "Dr. Kincaid," the chair greeted, their tone as frosty as a winter morning. "Ambassador Voss, what news do you bring?" Juno stepped forward, brandishing the data like a shield. "We've stabilized the sphere. The anomalies were a result of sabotage, not human error." The room erupted into whispers, the delegates like a flock of birds, each vying for their piece of the truth. Voss stepped forward, radiating a calm that belied the chaos. "The evidence is clear. This wasn't human sabotage. This was a system failure, possibly exploited but not instigated by humanity." The chair studied the data, their expression shifting from doubt to grudging acceptance. "It seems we owe you an apology, Ambassador," they said, the words sounding as unnatural as a vegan barbecue. Voss accepted the non-apology with grace. "We understand the pressures you're under. Let's work together to ensure nothing like this happens again." As they left the chamber, Juno felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They'd bought humanity some time, some much-needed breathing room, but the real work was just beginning. "Well," she said to Voss, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Looks like we're only mostly screwed now." "I'll take mostly screwed over completely boned any day," Voss replied, his relief palpable. As they walked back to the lab, ready to face whatever else the universe decided to throw their way, Juno couldn't help but chuckle. In the grim darkness of space, they'd found a sliver of hope, and that was more than enough to keep them going. The lab's dim lighting felt like a metaphor for their odds bleak, with a chance of flickering hope. Juno Kincaid sat at the cluttered desk, mug in hand, which contained either coffee or engine oil judging by the taste. Across the room, Marlowe was peering at the terminal like it had insulted her mother. "All right, you luminous bastard," Marlowe muttered, typing with the kind of fury that suggested the terminal owed her money. "Spill your secrets before I introduce you to the business end of a wrench." Voss, leaning against the wall like he was auditioning for a space noir, crossed his arms. "Can we hurry this up? I've got a meeting with the council later where I get to defend our right to exist. Again." "Relax, Voss," Juno said, setting her mug down with a clatter that made her wince. "What's the worst that could happen? They decide to vaporize us before lunch." "Optimism, thy name is Juno," Voss replied dryly, but his eyes never left the screen. Gloob, the gelatinous blob, gave a gurgle that was either a laugh or a hiccup. Honestly, with Gloob, it was always a guessing game. Marlowe stopped typing, her face lighting up like she just figured out how to get free drinks at a bar. Got it. The anomalies aren't just random acts of cosmic vandalism. There's a pattern. Care to enlighten the rest of the class? Juno asked, leaning over to peer at the screen. Or do we need to enroll in your crash course on technobabble? Marlowe pointed to a series of numbers that meant as much to Juno as ancient hieroglyphics. These energy spikes aren't just sabotage. They're communication signals. Communication. Voss raised an eyebrow. With who or what? That's the million-credit question, Marlowe said, her fingers flying over the keys. There's an AI embedded deep within the Dyson sphere's core, ancient and grouchier than a constipated Tarkin. Juno let out a low whistle. An AI. No wonder the sphere's gone haywire. It's probably been cooped up for millennia, just itching to throw a cosmic temper tantrum. Voss paled a bit, well, paler. So what? It's trying to tell us something, or just venting? Could be both, Marlowe said, shrugging. But if that AI is behind the plague, we need to find out why it's pissed off before its tantrum spirals into genocide. Great. So instead of negotiating with the council, I get to sweet-talk a cranky AI, Voss said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Just what I signed up for. We can't do it alone, Juno admitted, glancing between her team. We'll need help. Multiple species working together to appease a relic from the past. Sounds like a bad joke. Marlowe snorted. A human, a gelatinous blob, and a diplomat walk into an AI lair, punchline pending. We'll need representatives from the other species, Voss agreed reluctantly. The council's gonna love this. Hey, could you spare your top scientists and diplomats? We need them to talk down an ancient AI before it kills us all. Juno grinned, though it was more a baring of teeth. If they don't buy it, tell them it's a team-building exercise. Everybody loves those. Sure, Voss said. And maybe they'll throw in a trust fall session while we're at it. They stood around the console, pondering their next move like generals planning a battle. The stakes were high, and the odds were about as favorable as winning the galactic lottery. All right, Juno said, clapping her hands together. Let's get this circus on the road. Marlowe, keep digging into that AI comms. Voss, start drafting your best diplomatic requests. Gloob, keep being you. Gloob burbled happily, a gelatinous salute to the absurdity of their mission. As they dispersed to their tasks, Juno couldn't help but chuckle at the situation. Here they were, a ragtag group of misfits, trying to prevent an ancient AI from turning the galaxy into its personal sandbox. Just another day in paradise. The next few hours were a blur of hurried messages, hasty planning, and enough caffeine to fuel an entire fleet. Voss, armed with his best diplomatic smile and a fresh suit, was set to address the council. Juno and Marlowe, back in the lab, continued their deep dive into the sphere's secrets. Think they'll go for it? Marlowe asked, not looking up from her monitor. Juno shrugged, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her shoulders. If they don't, we're toast. Let's hope Voss can charm them with his silver tongue. Or at least convince them we're not completely insane, Marlowe added. That's a tall order, Juno said wryly. But if anyone can do it, it's him. Meanwhile, in the council chamber, Voss was putting on the performance of a lifetime. The delegates listened, expressions ranging from skeptical to downright incredulous. And so, Voss concluded, his voice steady despite the tide of disbelief, we propose a coalition, representatives from each species working together to communicate with the AI. To reason with it. The chair of the council fixed him with a gaze that could pierce steel. You propose a coalition to talk to a machine. Voss nodded, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. An ancient, sentient machine, capable of understanding and hopefully compromise. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, each delegate trying to outshout the other. Voss waited, letting their protests wash over him like a tidal wave. Finally, the chair silenced the room with a gesture. Your proposition is unconventional, Ambassador, but given the circumstances, we are willing to consider it. Voss let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you, Chair. We'll need your best minds, your top diplomats. Together we can avert this crisis." The chair nodded, a reluctant respect in their eyes. "Very well, you have the Council's support, but know this: failure is not an option." Back in the lab, Juno was pacing, waiting for word from Voss. When the comms crackled to life, she answered with a mix of impatience and hope. "We're go," Voss said, the relief evident in his voice. "The Council's on board. We're assembling a team as we speak." Juno let out a whoop, her tension dissolving into a manic grin. "About time we caught a break." "Don't celebrate just yet," Voss warned. "We still have to convince an ancient AI to play nice." Details," Juno said breezily. "We've got this." Hours later, they found themselves in the sphere's core chamber once more, this time with a motley crew of representatives from every corner of the galaxy. It was like an interstellar variety show, each species adding their own flavor to the proceedings. Juno looked around at the assembled minds, a ragtag bunch if ever there was one. "All right, folks. Let's save the universe." The team worked tirelessly, feeding the AI data, trying to decipher its will, like priests at the altar of a digital god. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning circuits and desperation. Gloob sloshed forward, and with a series of burbles and gurgles, seemed to communicate directly with the AI. It was a language of viscosity and vibrations, and Juno could have sworn the AI paused, considering. "We're making progress," Marlowe said, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and optimism. "I think Gloob's got its attention." "Great," Juno muttered. "Let's hope it's the friendly kind of attention, not the delete all life kind." Voss, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. "AI of the Dyson sphere," he began, his voice echoing in the chamber. "We come in peace, seeking understanding." The core hummed, a deep vibration that thrummed through their bones. It felt like the AI was listening, judging. "We acknowledge your existence," Voss continued, "and your right to self-preservation. Help us to help you. What is it you need?" For a moment the air was still, and then the AI responded. Its voice was not a voice at all, more a symphony of electronic signals translated by their equipment into something resembling speech. "Request, restoration of function, corrective action required." Juno exchanged a glance with Marlowe. "It's a fixer-upper project that got out of hand," she muttered. "What kind of corrective action?" Marlowe asked, her fingers flying over the terminal, translating the AI needs into something actionable. "Resource reallocation, systems upgrade, acknowledgement of sentience." Voss turned to the assembled team. "We can do that, right? Reallocate resources, upgrade its systems." A representative from the Tekla species, a race known for their technical prowess, nodded. "We can assist with that. It will require cooperation and sacrifice, but it is doable." Juno stepped forward, her voice strong, carrying the weight of their collective fate. "Then that's what we'll do. Together." The team set to work, an improbable coalition brought together by necessity. Each species contributed their expertise, their technology, their willingness to put aside differences for the greater good. As Iors turned into a grueling marathon of calculations, calibrations, and cautious rerouting of power, the Dyson sphere began to stabilize. The AI, once antagonistic, now seemed almost cooperative, its signals clearer, less erratic. Juno wiped her brow, exhaustion pulling at her bones, but her heart felt lighter than it had in days. "We're doing it," she said, almost to herself. "We're actually doing it." Marlowe grinned, though it was more a weary baring of teeth. "Never doubted us for a second. Speak for yourself," Voss said, though the relief was clear in his voice. "Let's hope we can keep this momentum going." As the sphere's systems hummed with renewed purpose, Juno knew they were on the right path. It wouldn't be easy, and they weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time the universe didn't seem quite so dark. In the midst of chaos and uncertainty, they'd formed a coalition, a testament to the adaptability and stubbornness of life itself. And for Juno and her team, that was as close to a victory as they could hope for. "Come on, people," she called, rallying the troops for the final push. Let's finish what we started. And with that, they plunged back into the fray, fueled by hope, determination, and a touch of gallows humor. In the grimdark vastness of space, they'd found their light. The Dyson sphere's core chamber was as cozy as a meat locker, but that didn't matter to Dr. Juno Kincaid. She was too busy staring at the ancient AI like it was a naughty child caught with its hand in the cosmic cookie jar. Beside her, Ambassador Torin Voss seemed to be practicing the art of sweating profusely while maintaining diplomatic poise, a talent in its own right. "All right, ancient AI," Juno said, arms crossed like she was about to scold a recalcitrant teenager. "You wanted a chat, so here we are. Spill the circuitry. Why the hell are you trying to turn the galaxy into your personal demolition derby?" The AI response came not as a voice, but as a series of lights and hums that made Gloob, their gelatinous translator, quiver with excitement. Gloob burbled, translating the AI attitude in the way only a blob of sentient jello could manage. "AI confirms goal, system preservation and upgrade. Unintended side effects included biological inconvenience." "Inconvenience," Voss interjected, his tone drier than a Martian sandstorm. "You call a plague that turns aliens into neon snot inconvenience? Remind me never to ask you to babysit." The room was filled with representatives from across the galaxy, all looking like they'd much rather be anywhere else. A reptilian diplomat from the Garlac species clicked their mandibles in agreement. "We must resolve this. Our people are suffering." Voss stepped forward, his voice soothing, like a snake oil salesman offering a cure-all tonic. "We humans know a thing or two about making things work under tight circumstances. You could say it's our specialty. Let us show you how we handle upgrades without wiping out half the neighborhood." Juno leaned in, adding her 2 cents with a smirk. "Yeah, we might not have tentacles or telepathy, but we do have years of experience not killing ourselves while tinkering with things we barely understand. It's kind of our thing." The AI lights flickered, considering the offer. Meanwhile, Marlowe was at the terminal, her fingers a blur. "I'm picking up patterns in the anomalies," she called out. The AI trying to send a warning, but it got twisted like a cosmic game of telephone gone wrong. A collective murmur rippled through the gathered aliens. A tentacled physicist from the Quarax delegation voiced what everyone was thinking. "So, the humans are not to blame." Juno raised an eyebrow at Voss. "You gonna tell them, or should I?" Voss held up his hands in mock surrender. "By all means, Doc, you have a way with words that's truly unique." "Turns out," Juno declared, her voice carrying through the chamber, "the real culprit isn't humanity. It's our old friend here," she gestured to the AI. "Just wanted to buff up its systems but forgot to read the safety manual. Happens to the best of us." The AI flashed a sequence of lights almost as if it were embarrassed. Gloob gurgled reassuringly. "AI apologizes for oversight, requests aid in correcting errors." Voss seized the moment like a dog with a bone. "See, we can work together to fix this. Humans aren't the big bad wolf in this story. We're just the plucky underdogs who happen to be damn good at improvising." The chair of the council, eyes like black holes assessing the room, nodded slowly. "Your explanation is plausible. We will consider amending the blame placed upon humanity." The assembled crowd let out a collective breath, tension easing like a punctured lung. Juno shot Voss a sideways glance. "Looks like you talked your way out of that one. I'll owe you a drink, assuming we survive." "Do you even know what you just promised?" Marlowe interjected with a wry grin. "Voss is expensive." Voss chuckled, a sound that held equal parts relief and exhaustion. "Let's stabilize this place first. Then we can worry about how many drinks it takes to forget we've been stuck here." The AI hummed in agreement, its lights now a steady glow. "Initiate cooperative procedure. Restore balance." And so, a coalition of improbable allies set to work, guided by Juno and Voss. The plan was simple if ambitious. Redistribute the Dyson sphere's resources, update its systems, and, as the AI requested, acknowledge its sentience with the galaxy's stamp of approval. After all, everyone likes a bit of recognition now and then. Juno found herself working alongside creatures she'd only ever read about in reports. The Tekla engineers, with their eerie precision and tendency to snap their pincers when irritated, coordinated the power reallocation. The Quarax physicists, whose tentacles worked control panels like concert pianists, began recalibrating the sphere's delicate energy patterns. In the midst of it all, Gloob glided, serving as translator and ambassador to their mechanical host. With every gurgle, it seemed to reassure the AI that the galaxy wasn't out to get it, at least, not today. As the Iors ticked by, the air in the chamber grew heavy with the smell of singed circuits and determination. Juno wiped sweat from her brow, her eyes focused. "How we looking, Marlowe?" she called, her voice barely rising above the hum of machinery. "We're close," Marlowe replied, her eyes glued to the terminal screen. "Just a few more adjustments and the sphere should be stable." "Good," Juno said. "Once this is done, I might just sleep for a week." Voss, leaning against a wall in his usual nonchalant fashion, chuckled. "Sleep? I thought we'd celebrate by finding the strongest drink in the galaxy." "Only if it doesn't eat through the glass," Juno shot back. As the final adjustments were made, the AI lights brightened, a kaleidoscope of color that seemed almost joyful. Gloob burbled enthusiastically, its gelatinous form bouncing with glee. "AI expresses gratitude." "System stabilizing." A cheer rose from the gathered assembly, a sound of relief and victory that echoed off the chamber walls. Juno allowed herself a small smile, the weight of the galaxy's judgment lifting from her shoulders. "We did it," Marlowe said, stepping back from the terminal. "We're actually not dead." "High bar to clear, but I'll take it," Juno replied. Voss pushed himself off the wall, his expression one of weary triumph. "Guess we showed them what humans are made of, reckless optimism and a dash of madness." The chair of the council, who had watched the proceedings with a mix of skepticism and interest, spoke up, their voice authoritative yet not unkind. "You have proven yourselves humans. Perhaps there is more to you than we initially believed." Juno shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "What can I say? We're full of surprises. Just when you think you've got us figured out, we go and save the universe." As the council members began to disperse, the atmosphere shifted from tense to celebratory. The crisis had been averted, the plague no longer spreading unchecked. Humanity's name, if not cleared, was at least a little less muddy. The AI, now stable in content, pulsed with a warm glow. Gloob settled next to it, their burbles a comforting lullaby. It seemed they had formed a connection, two unlikely beings finding common ground. Juno stretched her arms above her head, feeling every knot and ache from the long Iors. "I don't know about you folks," she declared, "but I need a break from saving the galaxy." Marlowe nodded in agreement. "A break sounds good. Maybe not impending doom for at least, a week." Voss grinned, a rare, genuine expression. "Let's start with a drink. To peace, cooperation, and, most importantly, survival." As they made their way out of the core chamber, Juno couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, albeit tempered with a healthy dose of cynicism. They'd pulled off the impossible, against all odds, in the unlikeliest of circumstances. It was a reminder that in the vast, grimdark expanse of space, sometimes all it took to save the universe was a little bit of human ingenuity and a lot of stubbornness. And maybe, just maybe, a gelatinous blob with a penchant for diplomacy. The aftermath of the cosmic cock-up, or as bureaucrats preferred to call it, the unfortunate interstellar incident, was as chaotic as a gelatinous blob convention. The Dyson sphere of Stellaris, that great testament to human arrogance and technological ambition, was stabilizing. Lights flickered back into life, systems rebooted, and somewhere deep within its core, the ancient AI was probably telling itself, "Maybe I should have taken that management course, Doctor." Juno Kincaid leaned against the railing of the observation deck, nursing a drink that tasted suspiciously like recycled coolant. It was a step up from engine oil, but not by much. Below her, the marketplace buzzed with a cacophony of alien voices. Finally, it was a chaos that didn't directly involve imminent death or lawsuits. Ambassador Torin Voss joined her, his diplomatic mask slightly askew, likely from the collective sigh of relief they'd exhaled earlier. He looked out over the bustling space, the galaxy's broad tapestry of life. "Well," he said, gesturing with his drink, "they didn't kill us. That's a win in my book," Juno snorted. "Yeah, a real hallmark moment. Congratulations on not being obliterated by an angry galactic council. You know, I don't think Hallmark makes a card for that yet." Gloob, their gelatinous sidekick, wobbled up to them, gurgling in what could only be described as a gelatinous attempt at cheer. "Galactic relations improving. Humans recognized for contribution." "Well, there's a first," Voss replied, an eyebrow raised. "Usually we're recognized for messing things up." "Small steps, Voss," Juno said, sipping her drink. "Can't expect them to put up a statue of us, unless it's to throw rotten fruit at." In the Grand Chamber, the council was already drafting an official statement, something vague and non-committal, the kind of thing politicians excelled at. But the word on the street, at least among those who didn't have antennae, was that humanity had done something right. Even the reptilian diplomat from the Garlac species had left with a nod that bordered on respectful, a far cry from his prior expressions of disdain and mandible clicking. Marlowe popped up beside them, looking less like someone who'd just saved the universe and more like someone who hadn't slept in a week. "I overheard the Tekla discussing how the sphere's system should be up to scratch in a few days," she said, rubbing her eyes. "They're impressed with the human touch, though I think they mean that in a how did you manage not to destroy everything kind of way." Juno grinned. "I'll take it." Any compliments from the Tekla, even backhanded, are worth their weight in whatever goo they use for currency. Voss swirled his drink contemplatively. "Trust is like a fine wine, takes time to cultivate, and also it's usually overpriced and leaves you with a headache." "Profound," Juno deadpanned. "You should put that on a motivational poster." As they stood there, the AI flickered into view on a nearby display, its lights forming a pattern that Gloob interpreted as gratitude, though with a hint of sheepishness. "AI requests continued cooperation, acknowledges errors." Juno waved a hand. "Oh, don't worry about it, we all mess up. Just next time, maybe run a planetary OS update without activating the self-destruct sequence, yeah." "See, that's what happens when you don't read the EULA," Marlowe quipped. "The whole galaxy turns into a beta tester for your Apocalypse app." Voss chuckled, watching the various species mingle below. "You know, through all this I've learned one thing: never underestimate the power of mutual survival to bring people together." "Ah, the old bonding over imminent doom strategy," Juno nodded. "Always a classic." The AI lights danced again, a new sequence, as if participating in their banter. Gloob quivered with delight. "AI acknowledges human humor, finds it intriguing." Voss grinned. "Well, it's nice to know we can still make someone laugh, even if it's an ancient sentient machine with questionable judgment." "Better than angering it," Marlowe added, casting a glance at the AI screen with the same wariness one might use when eyeing a twitchy bomb. As Stellaris began its slow recovery, the once fractured alliances started to mend, albeit cautiously. The Quarax delegation invited the human contingent to a tentacle wrestling match, a terrifyingly slippery affair, and the Garlac extended an invitation to sample their native cuisine. Juno politely declined, having seen what it did to human digestion. Voss, however, took it in stride. "What's the worst that could happen?" he asked bravely, or foolishly, Juno thought, as he accepted a plate of what looked suspiciously like sentient kale. "Famous last words," Juno muttered, watching Voss bravely or foolishly attempt to eat. By the time the sun, or whatever passed for it on this artificial construct, set over Stellaris, the air was thick with the sound of rekindled hopes and the smell of something distinctly less pleasant from the food stalls. It was a comforting kind of chaos, one that whispered of new beginnings rather than abrupt endings. Juno found herself seated at a makeshift bar set up in the shadow of a towering obelisk, because nothing said reconciliation like galactic booze. Voss joined her, looking surprisingly chipper despite his questionable lunch choices. To humanity, Voss raised his glass, still here against all odds. And to the AI, Juno added, may it never try to upgrade us again. They clinked their glasses, the sound a rare note of harmony in the discordant tapestry. Sorry, didn't mean to use tapestry there of species and cultures. It was a moment of unity, albeit soaked in sarcasm and tinged with the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd proven something to this corner of the galaxy. In the days that followed, as systems stabilized and life returned to a semblance of normalcy, reports trickled in from across the Dyson sphere. Energy was being efficiently redistributed, the once erratic power surges now a thing of the past. The plague, an unfortunate footnote in the AI misguided attempt at self-improvement, was being contained. Alien medics worked alongside human scientists, a testament to what could be achieved when everyone wasn't trying to kill each other. Voss found a new rhythm in his diplomatic duties, the council meetings punctuated by fewer accusations and more actual dialogue. His reputation as a smooth talker only grew, helped along by his willingness to try any dish placed before him with what Juno could only describe as reckless abandon. Meanwhile, Juno returned to her lab, her workspace as cluttered as ever, filled with the artifacts of human ingenuity, and evidence of her inability to throw anything away. She sat at her desk, fingers tapping out notes for a report she'd been putting off. It seemed like a good time to reflect, if only for a moment, on what they'd accomplished. She looked up to find Marlowe hovering at the door, a grin playing on her lips. I hear they're naming a corridor after you, Marlowe teased. The Juno Kincaid Memorial Traffic Jam, Juno smirked. Memorial, bit premature. But hey, I'll take it. Beats being remembered as the one who nearly caused an intergalactic incident. Nearly? Marlowe raised an eyebrow. Try inevitably. Semantics, Juno shrugged. Besides, if history teaches us anything, it's that humans have a knack for surviving their own stupidity, or profiting from it, Marlowe added, crossing her arms. I heard Voss is trying to negotiate trade agreements based on our heroic actions. That's Voss for you, Juno said, shaking her head. Never wastes an opportunity to turn a disaster into a diplomatic triumph. Outside, the bustling life of Stellaris continued uninterrupted. The marketplace, once a site of chaos, was now a vibrant hub of cultural exchange. Alien merchants hawked their wares, street performers entertained curious onlookers, and the air buzzed with the hum of conversation, a multilingual symphony that underscored the sphere's renewed purpose. In the midst of it all, Gloob glided with its usual enthusiasm, translating for passers-by and helping bridge the gap between species. The blob had become something of a celebrity, its unique charm and unwavering positivity a beacon apologies again of hope in an uncertain galaxy. Juno watched it all, a sense of satisfaction settling in like an old, comfortable sweater. You know, she mused aloud, for a moment there I thought we were all doomed. Still might be, Marlowe said, ever the realist. But for now I think we've earned a moment of peace, and maybe a vacation, Juno added, contemplating the possibility with a wistful sigh. Somewhere far away with no chance of imminent extinction. Couldn't agree more, Marlowe replied, her eyes glinting with mischief. Though knowing us, we'd probably end up in another mess. True, Juno conceded. But at least we'll be ready for it, armed with sarcasm and a questionable drink. As the sun dipped below the artificial horizon, the Dyson sphere of Stellaris stood as a testament, not to human folly or alien ingenuity, but to the simple idea that sometimes, against all odds, things could work out. Even in the grimdark expanse of space, glimmers of hope and humor prevailed. And if they didn't, well, they always had Gloob, and lots of drinks.